Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton and former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. We're here on a Friday, game eve already. It's still a long time until Georgia kicks off in Lexington versus Kentucky, though. 7:30 kick. Going to be a late one, guys. Going to be really a first opportunity already for these Georgia freshmen and guys who haven't had an away game like this because, Atlanta and Mercedes-Benz Stadium is its own thing entirely, right? But now they're on the road going to Lexington. It's a late kick, all that combined. First off, how are you doing? I know you were with Elon Musk in an important meeting earlier this week trying to figure out how to get our astronauts from space. I mean, and I know you guys had a good conversation, but that's kind of besides the fact. But
yeah, I told Elon to figure it out, dude. You know what I mean? I was like, we gotta get these guys home. But I'm good, man. Busy week. Sorry I missed you earlier in the week, but I'm excited to talk some Georgia football. I know we got some news, and I know the night games are always interesting from a player's perspective. Particularly one that's like not like a game of the week when it's just like a normal white night game, and yeah, it's a long way from now until kickoff.
yeah, and I'll ask you about that kind of the routine there for you guys, at least, which you did under Mark Richt when you were in Athens. But speaking about that game of the week situation, I thought it was interesting. So College Game Day was going to be there for
Hmm.
they're going to bring obviously that situation to Lexington and then have the primetime team on that game. But when after Kentucky's just blowout lost Carolina, they
Mhm.
switched things up. So it was going to be kind of that environment, but now it's obviously not. It stings a little bit. I mean, if you enjoy that environment, which I'm sure all of you do, but
Yeah, we could talk about some of the games later in the show, possibly. I know we're going to cover most of Georgia today, but I was definitely surprised by the South Carolina and Kentucky game last week. But just to speak to the late games, there's really no other way to put it other than it's just long, right? Like we get to sleep in a little bit on Saturday as instead of waking up at like 5:45. But we would stay at Lake Lanier at the Legacy Lodge, which I really liked because it was about a 45 to an hour long drive to and from there. So, I get nostalgia just thinking about it, driving, from Athens on Friday night down to Legacy Lodge, and then obviously from Legacy Lodge back to Athens on Saturday morning. But when it's a night game like this, obviously, whether you're home or away, right? Um, you got a long way to go from when you from when you get to the hotel, whether you're home or away, from when you get to the hotel the night before till you play, right? And the thing that's the toughest is like trying to maintain that focus from the walkthrough on Friday before you get on the buses to ultimately the game time the next day, right? And there's a reason why we always love the 3:30 games the most because it was like a happy medium of the two. You didn't have to wake up super early, but you also didn't have to like wait around at a hotel all day. So I think the hardest part from my perspective, and I think the coaches probably as well, trying to keep their guys just locked in, right? Because you got to think about it. And I think you know, whether or not they're home or away, you got from when you're eating team breakfast at like 9, you got about 6 hours of doing nothing, right? Some guys take naps in between meetings. There's meetings, but there's only so much that you can like prep for from a mental perspective at that point because like the hay's in the barn. So you really just want to go and get the game rolling sooner rather than later. And when you're playing a team like Kentucky, right? It's like you're obviously motivated. It's an SEC game, blase, blase, but it's not like they're playing, Clemson, right? It's not like they're playing, um, Florida or Tennessee. It's like, Kentucky had a letdown. I'm sure the Georgia guys are thinking they're going to go in there and roll them over. But I think what's the biggest challenge for coaches when they have a night game is keeping these guys focused for the entirety of that time between the last walkthrough until when they kick off the open kickoff.
Yeah. And speaking of locked in, already that's a good segue. If you thought Georgia's issues off the field with driving were over, apparently they're not. Um, Daniel Harris, sophomore defensive back, cornerback, he's been rotating in with Julian Humphrey to the first 2 games. Looked good. I mean, that group has been really good. Arrested on Thursday night, charged with 5 misdemeanor driving charges, reckless driving, no seatbelt, operation of unregistered vehicle, proof of insurance, and window tint. Really just everything you can imagine almost, except speeding, which was interesting because he was clocked going 106 per the report. So if that's all true, Artie, if you're going 106 in Athens, knowing everything that's transpired, if you get kicked off the team, if you get suspended, you absolutely deserve it, in my opinion. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I saw that when I was checking ESPN today. I was on the front, like the front tab, if you will, and I mean, it's just like tone deaf is probably like the best way to put it. Although I guess it's tone deaf would be referencing like you said something very like off-putting or stupid in a very in very insensitive in like a very sensitive moment. This is just like it's tough because he's not hurting anyone other than himself. And and look, I'm not condoning going 105 miles per hour, but it's like you got to have a little bit of like common sense and like understand the situation at hand, if you will, right? Like, and this is the last thing that Kirby Smart wanted, like
Oh yeah,
the last thing, and this is all people are going to talk about, and we could win 50-0 tomorrow, and at the end of the day, what they're going to talk about is there's a systemic problem at the University of Georgia, and they are prioritizing winning football games over the safety of the community, and which I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that's like how the media is, right? You know how
yeah,
opposing fans are, and it's odd to me because when you watch Kirby Smart's football teams play, they're disciplined, they're tough, they play assignment football, and they never get those like crazy stupid penalties of like late hits or excessive celebration. So it's like when you see these like traffic violations, speedings, reckless drivings, like for now going on like 4 or 5 years, you're like, I just think that it's like, I don't know if it's a program thing. I just think like kids are out of their minds when it comes to having unlimited funds and cars at this point.
yeah. That's a good point because when's the last time you saw like a late hit penalty, excessive
You don't.
celebration, George Pickens fighting that guy at Georgia Tech, which
That
was
was 4 years ago,
exactly that's like the
maybe
last
five.
time
That
I
was like
can
his
think
true
about.
freshman year. True freshman
Absolutely.
year.
Now you've had, I mean, Javon Bullard and that hit on Marvin Harrison, which was a legal hit. You've had kind of those situations, but nothing like egregious, which that's a really good point because you look up off the field and when, Kirby Smart he's not their dad. He's not going to be around them, 24/7 or what have you either. But as soon as they get off, kind of these dumb mistakes. And it'd be one thing if it was not a reoccurring issue and then you had something like this. Like, it's it's a kid, what have you. Uh, but it is, and they've had conversations with these guys about this. You know what I mean? And it
It's
still
just
happens, which man,
it's just odd because like he's not drunk. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
alcohol is it's such a dangerous and slippery slope because it just completely impairs your judgment. You know what I mean? But it's all like I don't know if it's like a fetish for like for young people. I don't know if it's like now everyone's got new cars because they have a little bit of. And I honestly don't know, and I'm not even speculating. I'm just like
mhm,
it's just like an odd thing to continue to do, right?
yeah,
Like, you know, if these were like 12 DUIs, we would be like, okay, let's get like ban alcohol, start testing everyone's piss for alcohol on a daily basis. Like, but this is just like, what did he get booked last night or was it today? Like,
Yeah,
he's
it
just
was
like,
last night.
yeah, like,
He got out 60 something minutes later on $50.
yeah, no comment on that. I have no idea how that happened, but it's just, to me, it's odd. And my guess is Kirby's going to be like, at some point, they're going to have to make an example of like what normally would be, and I don't want to call it a minor infraction, but like a relatively harmless infraction, right? It's not harmless if you get in a car accident and you kill somebody, right? But in this case, it's like a reckless driving, which is not great, but no one was hurt, right?
Yeah.
But I think at this point, Kirby's probably gonna have to be like, okay, we're doing zero tolerance. I can't take away your keys, but if you guys get a parking ticket, you're off the team. You know what I mean? I think that's
Mhm.
what's gonna end up happening because
Yeah, because
it
people
just
were hurt before, right? And
oh yeah, yeah.
absolutely. So I think they
I,
already had you have to assume that they already had something like almost a no tolerance, but maybe it was a different punishment that we don't
yeah,
know,
and
right?
I am not trying to be insensitive to what happened a couple of years ago. Like obviously, that is true. Like I think you guys lost me. I think that was such a significant tragedy that happened, and we subsequently are making similar mistakes. I say
Mm,
we, the program, and at this point, like I think they're gonna just Kirby's hand's gonna be forced, right? And
yeah.
it's unfortunate, but I mean, just like don't speed. It's not that hard.
Yeah, yeah, boneheaded, it seems, and, I've never been on that personally, that speculation boat when it comes to really anything involving
No.
these really anything legal, right? Because if you followed enough, around big cases or what have you, there's always something you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
always, right? And there's nobody's perfect on either side of things either. So I've never been one of those to jump on things or make these, kind of, to me, reckless comments about certain things, but still, I think, it's something that Georgia's going to deal with now for the coming weeks, and and eventually, when they play in big games and such, it'll get kind of under the rug there, swept under the rug. But Kirby Smart's going to be fielding questions on this now for weeks from his own beat reporters, really, right? And I can imagine him sitting in his office and finding out about this and be like, man, because we just the Trevor Etienne suspension, right? He was just getting hounded for questions and questions. He comes back, so okay, all right, moving on to better things here. And then again, so it's not. You said it when we first started talking about this. It's not at all what Kirby Smart wanted heading into this game too.
No.
And he's always been one to when we talk about Kentucky, and I've after covering the team for as many years as I have, they play him each year, and there's just so much consistency with how he talks about Mark Stoops' teams here, and toughness, physicality. He knows that Georgia hasn't been as good on the road in Lexington in his tenure, and that's kind of reality. You look at the points, and the margins there. They haven't lost 14 straight, but there's been tough games there. So he's told his guys, there's a tough physical team. This is an SEC opener. Not only is this an SEC opener, it's an SEC opener on the road at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Georgia played, for example, they played 24 true freshmen last week, bunch of true freshmen against Clemson. I don't know the exact number, but they were there, right? So a lot of these guys first time experience, and you already kind of explained the differences. And first off, even being a 7:30 kick when you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs really all day almost. So yeah, a lot of challenges Georgia's gonna face here. I think on the field, not as many challenges, right? And we'll get into that now. Well, in a minute. Let's hit injury updates real quick, then we'll get into that. Roderick Robinson. So this is from the SEC availability report. First really week of Georgia availability reports in program history. SEC instituted that this year. Roderick Robinson got that toe recovering from surgery. He's out. Jordan Hall had the stress fracture in both legs. He's going to be out. Michael Williams, ankle sprain, doubtful here. Warren Brinson, he's got that foot ankle contusion, doubtful. Daniel Harris, rest. So I just put him questionable here. We're not sure what's going to be happening with him there. As a guy who rotated in too, he might be active and then there's not play him. I wouldn't be surprised at that either. Julian Humphrey's been doing a fine job over there opposite of Dalen Everett. Xavier Miklod, abdominal. He's questionable. So there's your injury report from Georgia. And honestly, dude, all things considered, and we're talking about injuries alone here, Georgia's in a much, much better spot than it was last year in that department,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there were key players out. I know Michael Williams sitting there is probably, obviously the number one here. But considering a bye week next week and then Bama, I think it's working out pretty good for Georgia on the injury front. And that's just a huge part of football that's really just kind of it's not great, right? Because you want your teams to be healthy. You want the other team to be healthy too. You can get the best product on the field, and that all kind of meshes together. But for Georgia, if you're a Georgia fan, which I know you guys are, you should be happy. I think with the injuries so far this year, knock on wood, anything worse happens. All right, Artie, let's move into this game a little bit. So I touched on a few things in the first show this week, which you weren't here, but what should dog fans want to see from Georgia this week is kind of my question to you, and I'll set you up a little bit here with some series history. Last matchup, October 7th last year, we covered it. Kentucky entered undefeated. It was a primetime game. Georgia went 51-13. That was in Athens, though, right? And traditionally, this matchup in Athens has been much more one-sided. The last two times Georgia has played in Lexington, Georgia has scored 30 points combined. All right. UGA leads the series 63-12. And I already mentioned 14 straight, last loss coming in 2009. I remember that game as a kid. Man, that was one of those heartbreakers.
I remember
and then
the game closed my freshman year.
I totally just went over my head.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was a tough one.
Were you there for that one too?
Oh yeah,
Or that was a home game, right?
Yeah, it was home
Yeah.
game. Israel Troop, shout out Israel Troop, had his first college touchdown that game. 2009 home game. I think it may have been homecoming. It's just tough.
Was it Randall Cobb on the other side too?
Yep, Randall
Gosh,
Cobb.
man. I remember him.
Yeah.
I was just as a kid just so pissed at him for being how
Yeah.
good he was because he was doing everything that game.
He did everything in the league too.
Good grief.
Yeah, that was a tough game. I guess you're right about playing at Kentucky. It's a funky place to play, Kroger Field or Kroger Stadium. It's one of the two. And like Kentucky fans, they even though it's a basketball school, it's like they show out for their football team.
Mhm.
And it's always one of those places that gets a little bit colder sooner, right? And like, as the down south Georgia boys like to say, they don't like the cold. So it's like playing them in September shouldn't be an issue. But I think we played them in November or one year, and it was pretty chilly. So that's always something to look for, particularly at a night game. But yeah, I guess you're right now that I think about it, because we played them in a barn burner. It was in 2012 after the bye week against the Florida game when Jarvis had his big game or whatever. And we ended up, it was before that one. And we ended up, it was like, I think a 38-31 game. TK had a huge week.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
he went
you're
for
right.
188, something like that.
Yeah, 188. And then the next week, because we had a bye week, got beat by South Carolina, had bye week, Kentucky, barn burner, and then we played Florida and beat Florida in Jacksonville the next week.
Yeah. And TK, friend of the show. Great dude. I like him.
Great. One of the best guys you'll meet.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always so nice. Love guys like that. Yeah, so it's weird, right? But I think to me, Artie, it's just I know those Kentucky teams that we had, and we kind of thought it would be a closer game because of the similarities between the two as far as program building, right? They have focus on the offensive defensive line. Now, Kentucky isn't that recruiting hotbed like Georgia is, right? They don't have that program status, so Georgia's gonna beat you there as far as getting those guys in, but the message remains the same in how they want to develop and control the game, really, right? Field position, defense, run the ball on you, control things up front. Kentucky's not that same team that we've usually seen in those areas. And I think last week against South Carolina, that was proven. It was really, I mean, it's first year under new OC and Bush Hamden in Lexington. Comes over from Boise State. He was only there for a year or two. They had 44 passing yards, not minus 2.6 yards per pass. Brock went 3 of 10 for 30 yards. He was sacked 5 times, just running for his life. They averaged 3 yards per carry, allowed 11 tackles for loss, and then had 11 penalties. And that was at home against South Carolina, who had went to the wire with Old Dominion the week prior. And they have a redshirt freshman quarterback making his second start in his first row start. So it's just like, to me, that shows you a lot about that offense and the struggles they're having.
Mhm.
And, I said it on the show earlier when you missed, I was like, knowing the type of guy Brock Vandegrift is, and Kirby Smart shared a really cool story earlier this week. I posted on UJ Football Live. If you missed it, basically saying that conversation that he and Brock had when Carson Beck, he was really toying with the idea of coming back. And Brock told him, like, hey, if he comes back, really think about playing elsewhere. And they had kind of a nice moment there of Brock saying, I wouldn't be the player I am now if I wasn't here. And then Kirby Smart saying you did everything you were asked. And, so really that was a good situation. One of the better transfer stories I've heard.
Mhm.
And I think that speaks to the type of guy that he is. So watching him run for his life against South Carolina, that hit a little hard. I'm not gonna lie. And then
Mhm.
this week, I think it might be even worse, and that just leads you to think already, like, what are they gonna do kind of offensively different here, right? They have Wimsat, who's kind of that running quarterback. He transferred over from Rutgers. Do they put him more in and try to go to QB with the running guy? I'm not sure, man. Yeah, because Georgia, they've been really good as far as behind the line of scrimmage, really disrupting things so far this year. Everybody wants to talk about the sack totals for Georgia on a yearly basis. It's not really how they play defense. They more pressure oriented in the first place, but they have gotten sacks, right? So I mean, Carolina, I know they have a really emerging freshman 5-star that played really well last week, and his name escapes me right now. I don't have it in my notes. Um, but he was really tearing things up, and I couldn't help but think about how Georgia has a lot of those guys who can do the same thing, and then rotate in and get even fresh guys in there to do as well. So I really see that this is a struggle for that offensive line at Kentucky, man, and that defense I think would be fine with Javon Dumas Johnson and such if they had kind of a supporting cast on that offense who could really hold their own, get some time of possession their way, right? Flip the field position every now and then, but they couldn't do that last week. I'm not sure if that even changes at all this week.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you started up talking about the protection. It's like Brock is an older QB, but let's be very honest. Like he doesn't have a lot of game experience, so you got to think about it. He does not. He's a first time starting quarterback in a new team in a university that he's been there for 6 months, and it's the first time he's ever been lived away from Athens. I mean, he went to Prince Avenue, right, or Prince Avenue Academy, what have you. So you always have to bring it back to a human level, and then you have to also apply, like, start factoring in what's applicable to football. And when you're trying to gain confidence as a starting quarterback, as the guy, no matter how much talent that you have, like, you need to be able to protect, right? Like, you can't execute unless you're able to protect. And I think that's going to be the biggest issue, right? You can make adjustments. What I mean by that is, they could look at last week's South Carolina game and be like, oh man, like, what did we do wrong? Let's correct these mistakes and put a game plan together that will help us gain some confidence early on in the game, establish the run, maybe, right? Complete a few quick passes. Like, I don't necessarily know what the answer is for Kentucky, but I do know this: if you don't protect Brock, you're gonna be in a situation where, like, you're going to have to pull him because his confidence is going to be shot. You see it
Mm.
all the time in the NFL, all the time. Young, talented, like, QBs who are forced in there, and they're just like, go save the franchise or go save the team. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I'm out here seeing, I'm out here getting crushed. So
Yeah.
if they don't protect him, I think Georgia will just roll. right? But again, um, you never know how things can turn around in a week. So I think we'll know pretty early in the first quarter what this game's going to look like.
Yeah, I think we will. I think you're absolutely right. It'll just give its barometer, right? That first quarter, line of scrimmage, how things are moving off the ball. It'll give you an idea of what's going to happen in the second half. But
Mhm.
on that note, I think because Brock was pulled late in the game, but the game was already decided at this point,
Mhm.
right? And he was running for his life. So I looked at that, and I think some people can be like, okay, they pulled him because they wanted to see what Wimsat had and such. I'm not arguing with that, but I'm saying if he's running for his life like that, and he is your answer this year, you're not going to keep him in and let him get still hit in the fourth quarter with you down 25 points, right? So I think he starts. They might add in Wimsat a lot just to try to give Georgia some different looks with a primarily running quarterback. Um, yeah, and I think that's what they do. And I wouldn't be surprised if they run a lot of read option, things like that, right?
Mhm.
Use Brock's legs to try to keep him really just you want to keep Georgia's defensive line from getting to tee off and just knowing this is a pass down. They're going to pass, and I'm going to do what I want here. And even without Michael Williams and Warren Brinson, Georgia fans, you want to see pressure here. There's no reason Georgia can't with that porous offensive line for Kentucky. I don't think that's impacted by those two guys if they are ultimately out, which they're both out for this game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did not go, especially with the bye week and then Bama in Tuscaloosa the next. Last thing I'll touch, Artie, is and we talked a little bit about it with the 7:30 kick, so I won't rehash that with you. But part of my notes, and before we even got to it, was execution on the road here is what you want to see for Georgia. And we're
Yeah.
thinking big picture here, guys. We're thinking down the road against, like I mentioned, Alabama and Ole Miss and your Tennessees and those games, and Texas especially. You want to see execution on the road for these young guys. Carson Beck's proven that he can do it, right, Artie? But these other guys necessarily haven't, especially the young guys, the transfers, what have you, at least with a new team on the road. And you already mentioned the kind of the weirdness of a 7:30 kick and how you're twiddling your thumbs and you're sitting around all day. That can really just add, anticipation and maybe unneeded nerves and stress for no reason because you're sitting around for so long. Weather's not going to be a factor. I know that was going to be talk early in the season, early in the week, I should say. And I talked a little bit about that on the first show this week. And it looks like the weather's going to be fine. It's going to be like low 60s, no rain. So that shouldn't really inhibit either team. Something to keep an eye on if you're looking at the spread and such. Well, that's my last note on it, Artie. What do you have anything as far as what you would advice you would give to these guys for this 7:30 kick, their first of the season?
You cut out there, JC. What'd you say? Did I have any what?
Yeah, what would you tell these young guys as far as did you get any like routines for your night games that you came to be like, okay, this is much better for me?
Yeah, 100%. Look. One thing about football is there's almost like a militarization aspect to it. Like, and whether you play at the high school level, the college level, or the NFL level, like structure is huge, right? Like you do the same thing over and over and over again, whether that be lifting, uh, working with the athletic trainers to get your body right, practice, meetings, more meetings, right? And so e- each week you build up, right? It's not like basketball or baseball, you play a couple games a week. Like there's one game that you work towards each week, right? And so when you look at it holistically from the start of Monday to Saturday, when it's like you have your structured practices and lifts during the week and classes and all that. But really, when you get to the end of it, from when you step off at the Buttsmere to tip off, or not tip off, but that opening kick, right? There's like almost like a whole little mini week within a week, like within a 24-hour period, if that makes sense. And typically for a 3:30 game, like it's very condensed. Like you're up, you wake up early, you hit breakfast, you hit some meetings, you hit a walkthrough, you go back to your hotel room, you shower, you change, you hit the bus, right? But when you have this longer period, like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's like you have to find a way to build in structure throughout your day, right? And I think that's the one thing I would tell guys is get into a routine, right? I'm a little bit superstitious, so that's why I kind of love. I was big into routines, but like when you limit distractions, right? Even if the distraction's on your phone, right? When I say distraction, it doesn't have to be like some big distraction, but if you're able to get hyper focused and use this extra space in between, the game and when you usually step off, and you implement some structure or some sort of schedule in there, that always helped me get extra focused. Like some guys would just sit there and watch an extra movie, right? Some guys would go over the plays, other guys would go to Bible studies, some people would do X, Y, and Z, but everyone kind of had a structure, right? A lot of guys would play cards, for instance. But whatever it was to get them in that routine, because you need to get your mind right and be zoned in for that 7:30 kickoff or 7 o'clock
Mhm.
kickoff, right? And in order to do that, like you can't just, you're still college kids. Like some guys think like, oh, I'm at a hotel and this, that, this. No, no, no. It's a business trip and you have to treat it as such. And I think if I could tell particularly the younger guys, those 24 freshmen, right? Like this is the first time they're on the road, right? First SEC road game, right? So I think, and I know the coaches are saying this, like, hey, this is not like a staycation. This is not hey, we're here to kind of have fun. No, you're there to get the first SEC win for the season on the road. And those 24-year-old freshmen or those 24 freshmen, right? It's like each week that they play, they get further and further and further away from being true freshmen, right? And how are they going to be able to respond if they hit a little bit of adversity on the road in the SEC, right? Because not to get ahead of ourselves, but Tuscaloosa is right around the corner, right? Like we got a lot of big games coming up here. So I think it's a huge test for this young football team. And it is young, right? Just because we got Carson Beck, who's going to be a first round pick and maybe a Heisman winner and blase. This is a young football team. And when you're young and you're excited to be there, you're 2-0, you're playing some ball, you have confidence. Maybe that confidence is borderline cockiness at this point because you're playing so much football so early in the season. It's like you can slip up a little bit. And I don't care if it's Kentucky, the SEC football will humble you. So
Yeah.
if I was Kirby Smart, and I'm sure he's got a freaking vice grip on his team right now after the news that happened last night, he'd be like, y'all better get your minds right. You know what I mean? Like, because I'll bench your ass. You know what I mean? And he probably
Mhm.
said, I just threw a kid off the team. So it's time to like, and again, I'm not speculating. I'm just whatever. I'm just saying what I think might be going through his mind. Um, but you cannot let up. And I think the one thing that's tough about those night games, it's just easy to forget that you're there for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the point of the hotel is supposed to be this is where you sleep before the game. But when you spend that much time lounging around and on pay-per-view or whatever they got on the in hotels now, room service, this and that, it's like you start slipping away from the real reason why you're there. So focus on the
Yeah.
task at hand is what they used to say, and that would be my advice to those guys.
That was well put. And you mentioned it there. I mean, Alabama's a 7:30 kick,
Oh, dude.
right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
how big is this as a strategy for these young guys and really guys who've done it too, just to get back in the
It's
mode
a
of things?
it's a 7:30 kick central time. So and like people don't think that's a big deal, but it's a big deal. Like, because that's 8:30. Like your bodies have clocks, man. Right. And I think it's 8:30 kick for in Kentucky as well. Pretty sure Kentucky might be central time. Might be mistaken.
I'm not sure.
Um, but either way, it's those things matter. And I think Georgia's gonna be fine. I'm not, but 24 freshmen is a lot of young guys playing football.
Yeah. Already, UGA Football Live is a big picture show. Okay. All these things we talk about, we stress over, and we might seem a little bit too detail oriented in for a reason, right?
100%,
Championship
coach.
caliber team, championship caliber team. To get these things right because it's going to make more of a difference in Tuscaloosa, in Austin, in Oxford.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine how just pissed Kirby Smart is right now, though?
Oh man, dude. Hey,
Yeah.
you said. I mean, you gave an insight. Well, your own take on what he's saying, I probably add about 15 more choice words.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah.
And yeah, and I don't even do stadiums. I don't know what they're running right now. It's something that's just crazy. But moving on, Artie. Let's do our predictions here. So, and I'll just rehash keys to the game for me. Offensive line, defensive line, you should dominate here against this Kentucky team. Not the team of old that we've witnessed for Kentucky. Shouldn't be a problem, right? If you play up to your worth, right? Carson Beck went 389 in this game last year, 4 touchdowns and a pick. He should eat. Running backs wise, a heavy dose of Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier in this game. Branson Robinson, get him some more carries, get him comfortable. Yeah, you should have no issues there. Defensively, we already talked about the struggles of that Kentucky offense. You're going to be able to get pressure on him. Usually, and we've seen it this year so far, and it has in the years past. What does that mean? And Malachi Starks has played the star position this year, which is really interesting to me because I think that's awesome for Georgia. Having the versatility to move him around according to opponent. It's going to be interesting where they put him in this game. I would think it'd be closer to the line of scrimmage because we're going to get pressure. Most likely, Georgia is going to get pressure. So that means you're in forcing throws territory, which is not good if you're Kentucky because Georgia's defensive backs have shown a knack for the football. So I think, yes, Georgia's is far superior team here, I think. Now, I know we've already noted the kind of weirdness of playing in Lexington, but I don't think that is as big of a factor this year as it has in years past. The line right now, Georgia minus 22, total 45. I really like Georgia to cover. And total-wise, 45, I like the under a little bit. I don't think Kentucky's going to score much. It's going to be really struggle. I could see a garbage time touchdown, maybe, right? I'm thinking 40-3. It's a really close on that under. I don't see Kentucky making a movement there. And just to give you a little taste too, guys, UGA Football Live, JC and Arthur, we are 4-0 on Georgia games. We bet we're talking spread and the total here. We are 4-0 combined through 2 games. Artie, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit, right? I just think that the news last night to me, what would seem to be a distraction for most teams, I just think Kirby just has such a unique way of motivating guys and also kind of instilling a certain fear in his guys, right? And keeping them level headed when it comes to playing ball. I think it's going to be a bit of like a fire has been lit under their rear ends. And I think Kirby's going to want to make a statement. I think this football team's going to want to make a statement. I think, they're going to want to go into Lexington and really set the tempo early. I think we are going to run the football a lot and make their safeties, move up, right? Get within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And once we do that, I know how Bobo likes to just reel them in and go over the top. I see a lot of that happening, right? I think we're just going to pound them, and just absolutely look to break them. So I think we cover. I think we go for 200 plus yards rushing. I don't know if Carson is going to have the 389 and 4 touchdowns. I think they're just trying to impose their will on this football team. And I was a little bit higher on Kentucky at the beginning of the season, but after what I saw last week, it's like I think that I think they've lost a lot of talent in the past 2 classes that they've had, and at a place like Kentucky, while Stoops has done an unbelievable job building that program into what it is, a competitive program in the SEC as a basketball school, they don't have the capability of reloading like an Alabama, a Georgia, or LSU, and I think it's showing that this year.
Yeah. What score prediction you got?
Score prediction, great question. So the spread's 22, you said, right?
22, yep, total 45. It moved from 24 from what I looked at, but you can get it different depending on where you go.
Oh, my guess is like 38-7.
38-7. So you're pushing on the total, and then you got Georgia to cover. Heard?
Mm-hmm.
I like it, man. Yeah, we're pretty much similar on that, and we have been really all season. So we'll move on to pick 'em. Let's talk around college football a little bit. We'll talk through these matchups, and then we'll wrap it up there. You're 7-4 on the season. I'm 6-5. Really, the only difference we had was Miami and Florida in that matchup.
Mhm.
We've got Florida on the card again this week. So we'll pick 5 games, guys. We're doing it each week and see who comes out on top. Alabama got -6 at Wisconsin. Now, Luke Fickell in the bunch, right? Physical team. He's always been that type of coach, and he was that as a player. Okay. This is on the road for Bama. Noon kick. Is it a noon kick? It might be. It might be a 6 p.m. kick already.
I just saw
Now,
it.
now I'm second guessing myself.
It's noon. It's
It is noon.
noon on Fox. Yeah.
Okay, so that'll be an interesting trip for Alabama then,
Mhm.
right? Um, yeah, I think this screams like statement against a Big Ten team for Bama. You think about that game last week in USF, and I just wrote a post for Athlon Sports about this earlier today, so it's fresh on the mind. But they committed that offensive. Basically, both their starting tackles were out that game. They were holding one back as kind of like we need to rest him to get something to heal. Proctor had a shoulder; they didn't play him, and that offensive line was having a lot of issues. They had like 6 penalties, including 2 false starts. They allowed 4 sacks, which, considering who's your quarterback, how you are allowing that many sacks is really incredible. Okay, and that's not a huge number in a whole game, I guess. Kind of, it's a large number, but with a running quarterback like Milrow, that's pretty hard to do, especially
Mhm.
against USF, right? And they ended up scoring. They ended up putting that guy that they rested at tackle into the game in the fourth, and they scored 28. Right, so they really kind of answered the bell in the fourth, but it was a 14-13 game in the third quarter, and they allowed 200 yards rushing. Bama did. So for one of those teams that's really, really talented, Artie, it's like for me, this is a statement game now because you know that, and DeBoer's a good coach, that he is using that as, hey, what are we going to do now? How are you guys going to respond to that? It was a dismal showing, execution wise, especially too, right?
Mhm.
It's a dismal showing. You have an opportunity to make a big statement as you're the number 4 on the team, prove it, and you're going to play a Big Ten team and SEC and Big Ten. Those are always fun matchups too because they, the whole conference dilemma there. So I think Alabama goes big here. I think they win big.
Yeah, I think the board's a very good football coach. I think they have a ton of talent. I really do like Luke Fickell. I think Luke Fickell is going to build that program up to be something pretty special. But they were kind of in dire strait when not dire, right? It wasn't abysmal, but they didn't have a lot of talent. They're always going to have the offensive and defensive line, big guys, strong guys, tough guys, right? They're going to have the tight ends, you're going to have some running backs, but I, again, when you're a well coached football team and you have talent to back it up, which Alabama does, it's just very hard when you can't match up from a personnel perspective. Um, and if if the spread was like Alabama 12 or something, uh, or Alabama 14 and a half, right? I would say that Wisconsin would cover, but I think Alabama's going to win by at least 10. So I'm going to take Alabama in the spread.
Got it. And let me check on that too to see if it's been updated so we can be capital J
Uh,
journalists kind of. Oh, I think I missed a number already.
Okay, yeah, I was about
I
to say, I'm looking at 16 and a half. That
I
makes a lot
missed
more sense.
I missed
Okay,
the number 1 before the 6. I
yep,
apologize. It's a
yeah,
typo. It happens.
that makes more sense. So I actually like Wisconsin to cover the 16 and a half because,
Yeah. I'm not
uh,
changing.
okay, so
I can't. I can't. I think
yeah,
I don't think I'm allowed to.
no. Don't it was a Doak Walker Campbell. What's their, yeah, I
Let
think
me
it's
see.
Doak Walker. They
Camp
got
Randall. Camp
Camp
Randall.
Randall,
Oklahoma
Camp Randall.
is Florida State.
Florida State, okay. Um that's a tough place to play. They got the jump around going to the fourth quarter, and I think this is an improved Wisconsin team. Like everything I said, I stand by, but I think Alabama will be able to wear them down, and they just got too many athletes. So
Mm,
Alabama will win the game, but I think Wisconsin will hang tough for a quarter. And I don't think Alabama's going to run away enough to where they're going to win by 17
okay.
points.
Okay. Yeah, I'll stay with it. I think
All right.
it's deserved because of my mistake, and I also I think 3 touchdowns is fine because I said they win big in the first place. I didn't think they would cover that 9 that was wrong by a little bit. We'll move on. LSU at South Carolina. It's kind of been labeled as the game of the week for most people. Because really how South Carolina looked last week, right? LSU's reeling from that loss to USC. They need a win here, right? SEC opener for LSU. 7 points for LSU on the road here. Here's what I'm thinking, LSU, already.
Mhm.
LSU is a much more talented team. They are. Look at the dudes they have, right? They're a different team too because they're going to they'd be right to. They have a little bit this year, but let Garrett Nussmeier pass the ball. Give him the keys. He's been in that system, dude. He's been in college long enough. His 4th year. He's finally waited his turn. That's what he does best. Let him go off and let him use that talent at receiver. Good offensive line. Let him use that. And I think this is the game that they do that. I think this is the game they make a statement. So I think it's a statement game for them. Carolina, good at getting after the passer. They have been this season. Offensively, that's where they struggle. And that's where they struggled with Old Dominion. They had a lot of fortune against Kentucky last week when you look at the turnovers and such too. And the really just execution mistakes by Kentucky and some bad bounces too that went Carolina's way. But I know like everybody's talking about Williams-Brice Stadium, the environment. This is not an 8:00 kick. You know what I mean? This is a noon kick in Carolina. It's going to take a little bit of the sting out of that environment. Not all of it. Still a really good place to play and a tough place to play for SEC teams. But I think LSU makes a statement here, right? I think I'm taking the quarterback, the experience, and really I think talent wise for Nussmeier. Sellers might be that guy as a dual threat eventually, but I don't think it's this year. So that's why I'm liking LSU to make a statement here.
So I like USC to cover. And I was disappointed with how USC in the past year has looked because I was a little bit higher on them as a program on Beamer, but they showed me something last week. And again, I don't know how good Kentucky is. I don't think they're very good, but either way, going on the road and winning in that kind of way in a convincing fashion. And one thing about South Carolina, right? They always have some dudes. They just have dudes. And so I'm looking at it right now, right?
This
It's
line is now 6. I'm looking at now. These are the numbers I pulled from earlier in the week, so I didn't really look them up.
right. It's a
It's now
noon
6.
game.
So that
Noon
means
game.
hold on. I'm sorry. Odds. That means hold on. I just want to I want you to be fully educated here. That means odd makers want you to take South Carolina. If that line goes from 7 to 6, they want you to be like, oh, less than a touchdown, South Carolina for sure. Yeah, might
I
tell you
was
something,
taking
Artie.
I was taking them at 7 anyway. So I'm gonna go with South Carolina. That place is a tough place to play. Now I'm gonna bite. I'm gonna regret this because I think Brian Kelly is very good at rebounding. Right, he rebounded after that awful Tennessee loss. Um, but I don't know how good LSU is. Right, I think they had a very special player under center last year, and I think was he was able to put a lot of makeup on a team that I don't know how good they actually were. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And while LSU will always have talent and a plethora of talent, I just think that I don't know how good they are. I don't know how good this quarterback is, and I'm still not in love with their defense. It's much better. But yeah, I'm just I'm not sold on them yet. So I think it's gonna be a barn burner. I don't know who's gonna win. Like LSU, I could see winning tight, but I bet you it goes down to the wire.
Okay. Boston College at Missouri. I might be even more interested in this one than I am
Oh yeah.
LSU, South Carolina, just because we both were high on Boston College going into that game versus Florida State. We both took them. We didn't pick them outright, but we took them to cover. This is the same line that game was, which is Boston College as a 16.5-point dog, right? You're going at Missouri. Now, this has turned in from what looked like for Missouri just another non-conference game that they're probably going to win big by as a top 10 SEC team. that's coming off a really, really good year and has some high expectations. Now it's kind of turned into a test for them, which if I'm a Missouri fan, I really like this,
Mhm.
right? Because it makes our slate look better, but as one of the weaker slates in the country, especially in terms of the SEC, because Thomas Castellanos, Bill O'Brien there leading your Eagles. Castellanos 5'9", what, 210 soaking wet, and he's running around for his life back there, but he makes plays. He's incredible to watch. I love watching him play ball, man. Um, so this is going to be tough, right? Because you have a running quarterback who is taking down the mighty Seminoles, who are not so mighty anymore, but talent-wise they are. He's already done it once. Can they do it again here? It's a really fun game if you're previewing this one from that for really that standpoint alone. Now, Missouri, of course, has the guys, right? They've
Mhm.
recruited well. They have. You might have missed it because it's Missouri. They recruited well. Eli's done a great job. They're really well coached team. They're disciplined, and they have a returning quarterback in Cook. They replace their running back, of course. But then you have Luther Burden, and then the defensively, they have some guys that can absolutely scoot. They're really fast. But Boston College, man, they've done it before. They played a similar team talent wise in Florida State. So I'm really leaning Boston College here, Artie.
So I disagree with you on Missouri being a similar team to Florida State. I think similar
Talent
to
wise,
LSU. No, I disagree. I think LSU similar to LSU. I think that Florida State had a lot of talent last year. Um, I don't think they are as talented. And now I'm talking about Florida State, right? I don't think they're nearly as talented um, this year as they were last year, which is why I think we're seeing the season unfolding. And I think DJ Ugalungala is just should probably switch to tight end at this point. I think Missouri has built Eli Drinkwitz, I think is his name. I always mess it up.
Drinkwitz.
Drinkwitz. I think he's a hell of a football coach. I think he's built a legitimate program there. I think he's recruited well, and he knows how to put together an offense and score points. By the way, he always plays Georgia very well. So I think it's a very good football team. I love that like people are talking about BC football. I love that BC is ranked. Um, and I'm pulling for them. I like the quarterback. I think he's a dynamic playmaker, which tells me that they have a shot. But I think Missouri's really good. I think it's really hard to play on the road in the SEC, particularly if you're not an SEC football team. And 16 and a half is a lot. It's a lot. But I also am pretty close, semi-close to this football team up here. And that roster is pretty bare. I think they're finally got a well-coached football team in Bill O'Brien. But that's a tall fucking, sorry, I just dropped the F bomb, but that's a tall order for a team to go into Missouri and cover. So with all that being said, because I'm a homebody, I'm going to say BC's going to cover. I just don't think they're going to win.
Oh no, yeah, they're not going to win. I'm not saying that. You set that up for Missouri covering by a lot
Yeah,
the entire time. Change your
yeah,
plans
yeah.
there.
But I do think Missouri is very, very good though. Like I think they're
Yeah, me too.
arguably, I think they're going to be. I think it's going to be. Yeah, I think we might see him. We might see him twice this year.
Yeah, Texas A&M getting 3.5 points at Florida. Now, things to know about this, right? We'll start with Florida. DJ Lagway and Graham Mertz are both going to play. They're going to use a two quarterback system. That has rarely worked. We know this. They should really just start DJ Lagway, in my opinion. I think that's clear. He's a different type of player. You can always tell when there's that different guy. Threw for 460 or something like that, close to that last week in his debut with Graham suffering a concussion and out with that. But now he's back. You had an experienced starter versus that and a talent. And if I'm Billy Napier, you need somebody to help save your job. And I think he might be the guy, former 5-star. Just play him. But anyway, they're both gonna play at Florida and Gainesville. And A&M, Garrett Wiegman, who I've not been very nice to this year. I'm sure he's a great guy. but he loves to stare down his receivers and throw it without even looking to a covered man. But he's actually questionable for this game. So I was really wrestling this with it before. I was like, because I already took Florida once this year and they absolutely got destroyed. But it's in Gainesville. A&M without Weigman, what are they do? They already had offensive issues. What are they going to look like without him if he's not able to go, or even if he's not 100%? So I'm kind of wanting to lean Florida here. All right, it's a hard line.
I think Florida's awful. I like Texas A&M outright. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even think there's no. I mean, who knows?
I don't know.
But I think Florida is treading water. I think they're already drowning. So
yeah, dude, I'm just not sure on this one. You know what? Go Gators. I'm taking them. Just to go different than you, to be honest, because it's a toss up here. I don't know because I'm not as high on A&M whatsoever. And Lagway, he could really be a difference maker for that team. Right. We'll see. Arizona and Kansas State here playing tonight, actually, Artie. So we get to witness some pretty good football. We've got a top 20 matchup here. 14 Kansas State, 20 Arizona. Arizona comes in from the Pac-12. They're now members of the Big 12, if you haven't noticed. There's Big 12 is completely wide open here. Okay. And Oklahoma State to a close one with Arkansas last week. They're probably my favorite to win the Big 12 here. New look Big 12. And Arizona's coming in with a really good quarterback and receiver duo here in Fafita and McMillan, who's going to be a really good NFL receiver, it looks like. Kansas State-wise, they love to run the ball, right? I think they play a little bit better defense, but Arizona can score with the best of them. It's probably going to be a shootout. The total is 60 points, right? I can see this being like a 37-34 game, something like that, already. But I think, Kansas State's getting 7 points here at home. I don't know, man. I think Arizona is just going to be right there in like a field goal game. Man, they can score at will almost, it seems like. But I know it's early in the season. We might look back at that and be like, not really. But it's what I'm leaning to, and I think I like Arizona to make it a close game.
Yeah, I like Arizona too. I like the new head coach. He's former San Jose State coach Brent Brennan. Didn't have a ton of success at San Jose State, but didn't have a lot to work with, and went to a few bowl games. Was there for a while. But I do like Kansas State. I think that program is. I think they've for a few years now have really started kind of building momentum. They get a specific type of player, and it's hard to describe what type of player that is. But they're always a little bit more athletic than you think. They're tough, and they typically have pretty good team speed. I don't know where they get it from because I don't think Kansas State or Manhattan, Kansas is a recruiting hotbed, but they do a very good job of infiltrating Texas. So I think Kansas State's actually going to win and not win big, but I think they'll cover. I think they'll win by 7 points, probably more closer to 10.
All right, so I kind of like it because we're gonna get some movement on this leaderboard here already this week because we're going against each other so much on this card. I like it, man. Great touching up with you a little bit before Saturday's game here. We're going to be live tomorrow night. I don't know if Artie's going to be able to make it with his sleep schedule, but I'm caffeine, baby. We'll ride that caffeine and we'll get instant reactions after the Georgia game on X, Facebook, or YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network from me after tomorrow night's game. Hopefully it's a shorter one for that reason. But thanks so much for watching, folks. Really appreciate you taking your time out to listen to us rant. And we'll be doing it every week. Thank you so much. If you're listening, wherever you get your podcast as well, we'll put this out there in case you rather listen. But until next time, Artie, we'll see you soon.
All right, go Dogs.